Spongebob Boys!
Oh, God, it's Spongebob Boys!
You thought it would never return, but here it is again. Me and Gus ready to suffer under the nightmare that is new SpongeBob.
You can take the boys out of the SpongeBob, but you can't take the SpongeBob out of the boys!
I really, really wish you could, though.
It's medically impossible. The doctor said that there will be SpongeBob inside of us until the day we finally dry up like the sponges we are.
It's like fucking microplastics. It's micro sponges.
Boys, sponges, bobs, we're back.
We are at least 50% glad to be back. We were going to be 100% glad to be back, then we watched the episodes. Thank you so much, everyone who is watching, enjoying this, for your patience in our absence. And there were, a few quite exciting reasons why we weren't around as much, right, Gus?
We've been doing some of that professional writing.
Yeah, it's only the source of our income.
Exactly. We only make money off of it.
The fantastic, wonderful new show we've all been working on called The Kingmaker Histories, which Meg is the showrunner on. Wonderfully, unlike Less is Morgue, it's all on YouTube. And the YouTube uploads are, simulcast with the uploads on podcatchers. So we can put in a link to the YouTube channel right here, so you can go check out those after you've listened to SpongeBob Boys. Gus and I have written episodes, and we've provided a bunch of, additional voices across the episodes as well. So you can have some fun spotting us, and as well other channel favorites. Obviously, Meg is heavily involved being the showrunner, head writer. Friend of the show, Addison Peacock, plays the villain.
If you wanted to see the contributors of this channel do a, serialized, world-built, historical fantasy fiction show, it exists now, and it's called The Kingmaker Histories. Most of the season is out now, so you can go and listen to it. It's a really good time. Highly recommended.
And if you would like to see some of our writing in a much more episodic sense, there's another show we've been doing. Isn't that right, Gus?
Yes, we have been working for Bloody Disgusting's new audio drama offshoot, Bloody FM, and we were tapped for a show called Mayfair Watchers Society, which heavily features the monsters of one Trevor Henderson.
There are some wonderful ones already out that we've written, and there's a streak of great ones about to come out. One of the early episodes is myself and Gus co-wrote it. It's called Scissors. It's a super creepy tale of small town paranoia. It's all really wonderful, exciting stuff. And if you want to see these written by Gus, myself, Meg, Addison, check out Mayfair Watchers Society anywhere you get your podcast. Personally, I listen to it on Spotify. And the Kingmaker Histories on YouTube and anywhere you get your podcasts, like Spotify, Apple. I believe that's all the housekeeping sorted for SpongeBob Boys. All the delaying we can for the horrors to come.
Yeah, no, let me just do a nice, every time I think I'm out, they pull me back in.
I've been hearing a lot of Gus going to quite, sort of Boston-y spaces, because I convinced him to download Tabs the other day.
When I game, I become a bit of a Boston driver. I become a bit of a rambunctious little lobster man.
And today, it'll be like a Boston Tea Party, because I'm British, and watching these episodes made me wish someone would throw me into the sea. Who will begin? We're doing classic, original flavor SpongeBob Boys. We've both watched 2 of the 11-minute episodes each.
Well, it's funny that you said original flavor because one of my episodes is titled Krabby Patty Creature Feature.
I'm terrified. Do you know what? I'll let you lead. We're going to do our classic method. Gus does one, I do one, Gus does one, I do one. Let's go. Krabby Patty Creature Feature. I am terrified.
So, with that title alone, you know that this one has to start inside the Krusty Krab, as all
sign.
Great SpongeBob episodes do. I believe that was the enter rule.
Yeah, it's so funny because you always get the weird, horror-themed ones. I made up a kind of semi-horror-themed one with the Great Krabby Gold, or whatever the fuck that one was called, in a previous episode.
The Great Krabby Ass.
Oh, wait. You got Don't Look Now, which was another horror-themed one in one of our previous episodes where we had the Pyramid Head SpongeBob.
Yeah, no, that's right. That's right. This time, so Mr. Krabs is going around the Krusty Krab and he's saying that he's going to add this new interesting menu item. It's like a new type of Krabby Patty. And he's telling everyone, like, oh, you got to try this. It's brand new. And people are just kind of like, okay, sure. But SpongeBob is curious because he's like, I haven't heard anything about a new menu item.
Oh yeah, naturally, your chef would be the last person you tell about these kinds of developments.
Yeah, on the day you're announcing it, no less. So things are already suspicious from the start. Mr. Krabs leads SpongeBob into a door that we don't usually see in the Krusty Krab that takes him inside of a secret laboratory where Mr. Krabs says, "This is my secret lab where I experiment on food."
See, this is the kind of experiences that inevitably cause SpongeBob to change from a happy, youthful fry cook to the jaded proprietor of an exclusive island-based culinary cult that eventually dovetails into a artistic murder-suicide.
Yeah, no, I mean, hey, I'd watch it.
The Krabby Menu.
The Krabby Menu.
Alright, so what happens in the secret lab where Mr. Krabs experiments on food? Which is so funny because, like, that's such a Plankton thing.
Yeah, I can't emphasize enough that, like, Mr. Krabs is off theme here, and the way he says, where I experiment on food, I just thought of that, like, Candle Cove creepypasta where the ship says, you have to go inside. You know, it's a line with that sort of, like, horrible foreboding implication.
It's Mr. Krabs doing the whole, like, skin taker thing.
Yeah, no, literally. He's the skin flint taker.
God. So, the Skinamarink taker.
Spongemarink.
Can I make a prediction? At this moment in the episode?
Uh-huh.
Is this going to go to similar places to the one-off joke of the appetizer in, I believe, Squilliam Returns?
Yes, but worse.
Oh no. Alright, please proceed, sir.
So it turns out that in this secret laboratory, we have Mr. Krabs pull back the curtain, and we're jump scared by a giant eyeball on a magnifying glass. Pan out, it turns out it's Sandy, and Sandy is here doing food mad science.
A weird, like, running thing that's gonna be, like, between some of our episodes tonight is just things that are, like, when did it and why did it occur to you to pair these two characters?
Yeah, so Mr. Krabs decided out of nowhere, time to change the Krabby Patty secret formula and get Sandy to make science-based Krabby Patties that are, like, designed with non-specific science to be better in some non-specific way to the regular Krabby Patty.
God, Mr. Krabs is opening a gastropub. It's gonna be horrible.
I couldn't help but get, like, flashbacks to, like, Krabby-O Mondays, where, like, okay, but their synthetic patties were bad, but here they're fine because Sandy is making them. It doesn't, on the face of it, I don't buy that the characters want to do this.
That's when we had only partially flanderized Krabs. When there was some sense of him, like, caring about the Krusty Krab's, like, good name. And, like, you know, it being this thing that he was kind of proud of building with his own two claws. Now, I think Mr. Krabs would, like, genuinely try to get away with, like, feeding the customers literal shit if he thought it could bring costs down.
Oh, absolutely. Like, while he's selling Krabby Patty NFTs on the side.
Yeah, it used to be a vital amount, like, a vital thing to the plot that the Krusty Krab made good burgers and the Chum Bucket made bad food, which is why Plankton is always trying to steal the formula.
But as this show just devolved into a, like, workplace comedy about the world's worst fast food restaurant, everything had to become more disgusting. And case in point, when Sandy presents a radioactive, like, levitating red energy Krabby Patty.
Which is, like, again, the funny thing is, if Sandy's whole personality hadn't been reduced to the single trait of, like, mad scientist, like, you know, she could have brought some, like, Texas flavor to this. Texas, you know, a famously meat-loving state.
Well, it's something that I think I want to discuss now because it will definitely come back in the other episode I've brought to the table. Is that the characters in SpongeBob are selectively flanderized. In this episode, Sandy is Science Sandy. In other episodes, she might be Texas Sandy or Karate Sandy. But these characters are only able to hold one of their character traits in their head at a time.
Can I make a really kind of tasteless and like nightmarish comparison?
Oh yeah?
And I feel slightly less awful mentioning this because of how it's affected
No,
my
go
family.
ahead. Go ahead, say it.
It's the kind of like, moments of lucidity you see in like dementia patients.
Yeah.
Is what this show and these characters have. Of occasionally it's like, look, it's the old you.
And meanwhile, the rest of their early season personality is just screaming in the sunken place.
It's horrifying. This is the show that all of you asked to have back. Every episode is simultaneously like a weirdly chill thing you can vibe and draw to. Save, by the way, don't drop your spaghetti. But at the same time, is something that will like shake you to your core and give you horrific images you can't shake.
Oh, we're about to get into the horrific images, Henry.
All right, continue. After the red radioactive patty.
So the red radioactive patties are premiered, and again, these things are levitating off their plates, and everybody's like eating them, and like for, like a solid minute, everybody loves them. These are great. Like, these are the best thing ever. They're new and improved. The only person who's skeptical is SpongeBob, because he's like, well, I'm not even making these anymore. Why do I even have a job here?
All the customers are the people on that bridge, like 20 miles downwind of Chernobyl. Like, oh wow, look at all this pretty stuff in the air.
Yeah, and then the body horror begins. So, Mr. Krabs is the first one to go because SpongeBob points out that he's got sesame seeds growing out of the back of his neck. This is the precursor to Mr. Krabs fully mutating into a half Krabby Patty, half remnants of Mr. Krab abomination.
Why has this become this, like, fucking SpongeBob, Junji Ito short story?
It really feels Junji Ito. Everybody starts transforming into these Krabby Patty monsters, including Sandy, gets morphed into this, and while SpongeBob hides, these Krabby Patty monsters are now just like, there's one guy in the restaurant who didn't eat the new patty because he was a little suspicious of it. So then one of these Krabby Patty monsters reaches into his patty flesh and shoves some of it into the guy's mouth, thus converting him as well.
This is that Garfield SCP that is full of lasagna made of Jim Davis's flesh that force people with it.
Yup, and so these things start going out of the restaurant throughout Bikini Bottom, like moaning, "Eat us! Eat us!" It's real bad. It's really not a poorly disguised fetish at all.
After the death of Steven Hillenburg, SpongeBob had just been consumed by the same, like, perversity that was in, like, every other Nickelodeon show.
For the love of God, Henry, don't say consume.
Oh, no.
So while this montage of, like, they're feeding themselves to Bikini Bottom and creating more of these monsters, Bubble Bass appears!
You got Bubble Bass too?
Yeah!
I had a Bubble Bass episode.
You have Bubble Bass? Oh my
Meg's
God!
here to give me a bubble tea.
It doesn't have any bubbles in it. It's just iced tea.
Yeah.
He doesn't like the bubbles.
We won't get into that now. Thank you, Meg. But anyway, so Bubble Bass was in yours as well.
It feels like in the modern seasons, they're like bringing back these named characters because it's like, hey, look, people on the internet will talk about the fact that Bubble Bass returned.
Yeah, it's such a bizarrely cynical thing because Bubble Bass is like Flats the Flounder in that their like one joke was so perfectly used in the episode that they were made for, and they don't need to come back after that.
So yeah, he's confronted by Patty Crabs, and he does this whole like, oh, is this some kind of promotion? I'm not impressed. You even made giant fake pickles to try and impress me. So he says pickles.
Oh, get it? So he says the pickles thing. Meme.
Yeah, exactly. And then Mr. Krabs turns him into a Krabby Patty. We also see Patrick appear, and Patrick just decides to eat the gross thing because, Patrick, gross, he eats things. And he turns into a guy too. Everybody is turned into one, including Squidward.
Naturally. But again, so, alright, it's simultaneously this weird kind of, like, feeding slash, like, vor type thing, but also, like, transformation fetish as well. Because I
Yeah,
bet
just
there's a
like
lot of people who are into the idea of, like, people morphing into food.
morphing into food that then really wants you to eat them. Yeah, this is very specific and very targeted, and this doesn't come out of nowhere. Also, I misspoke earlier, and there are 3 people left in the city that are not infected, and the narrative goes out of its way to point this out. SpongeBob is not affected, and also Perch Perkins is here reporting on this. Remember Perch Perkins? Hey, remember, internet people, that Perch Perkins exists?
It feels like whoever wrote this episode did it with just, like, the SpongeBob wiki open in another tab.
Yeah, exactly. Like, why not bring Nicholas Withers back into this?
Please bring Nicholas Withers back. Take Lily, our Lord Nicholas Withers.
So anyway, Perch basically tells SpongeBob that there's one more person left who's unaffected, and he gets transformed as he like croaks out Plankton, and then he morphs.
Of course.
Yeah, so SpongeBob has to go seek out Plankton. Plankton has been waiting all day for people to come in and eat the chum in the restaurant. He has no idea that a zombie apocalypse has broken out with Krabby Patties. And when SpongeBob bursts in, he is so skeptical he doesn't believe him.
So, alright, how far into the episode are we by this moment?
We're ramping up towards the end because, even the SpongeBob Plankton team-up is short-lived. The Patty Monsters, they break in, they change Plankton almost immediately, and he just goes, "Have a slider," because he's a small patty, get it?
It feels like this whole thing was a fucking life support system for that one joke.
Yeah, also Karen gets transformed, which doesn't make any
sense. How does that
sense.
even work?
They feed the robot the Krabby Patty stuff, and her screen depicts a Krabby Patty.
This is kind of like a terrible version of, was it, I Once Was a Teenage Gary?
Yes, except the entire episode is people transforming into the things.
Isn't it so funny that, there was that long, it was proven to be a myth now, but that kind of story about some people Mandela affecting themselves into believing.
There was a horrifying transformation scene.
Yeah, there was another really disturbing transformation scene that was edited out of all subsequent releases, and people are desperately trying to find it. But that's just a fucking Tuesday for modern SpongeBob.
Yeah, exactly. If somebody tells me there's a horrifying body horror transformation in a modern SpongeBob episode, I go, "Oh, okay. I hope I don't get that one on the next spin."
Well, that's the thing. It's because SpongeBob is just producing its own lost episodes these days. They even had that episode that I think legitimately did have a bit cut out of it, where they put the red eye Squidward from Squidward Suicide into an episode.
Yeah. They're just leaning into it now. So Henry, SpongeBob is the only one who is not affected. How do you think that he cures them? How do you think that he fixes this epidemic?
I'm gonna guess, since he's in the chum bucket, he feeds them the chum.
You're absolutely 100% correct. The chum from the chum bucket is effectively anti-Krabby Patty, because Plankton and crabs are enemies. Therefore, there's a yin and yang-like structure to chum and the Krabby Patty.
Naturally.
Yeah. So he cures everybody by feeding them chum, and they all turn back to normal, and the patties are discontinued. And SpongeBob says this kind of cheesy thing about yeah, well, maybe science isn't even necessary to make food. Maybe science bad. SpongeBob does a bad Black Mirror episode.
Yeah, well, what a weirdly, just what a bizarre message for... And again, do you know what? This is something that has both been done before in the episode with Krabby All Mondays, as you mentioned before, and in SpongeBob versus the Patty Gadget. Which was the whole the Davy Crockett.
You mean the John Henry parody?
Sorry, John Henry. I don't know American myths.
Yeah, well, John Henry's he's the spike driving.
Yeah,
man
he
on the railway.
beat a machine at building a railroad or something, right?
Yeah, Davy Crockett was a real dude. He was at the Alamo.
Oh yeah, he was
as Bright tells
Remeber
us.
the Amalo. That's it.
Yeah, Remeber the Amalo. Yeah, and I remember it to this day.
Another deeply unappreciated Gus tweet that will maybe be on screen. These episodes are long. Editing them is tough. That was Krabby Patty Creature
Feature. Yeah.
I've remembered as well, you've gotten other, like, horror-themed ones, because that same one where you got Don't Look Now, you got that one with ghosts, didn't you?
Yeah, the Cajun previous restaurant that made the, like, bad food and summoned spirits from hell.
But not just that one. One where the start of it was, like, Plankton watching a ghost movie. Or that might have been one of the ones that I got.
Wait, you mean the fisherman, where like Squidward?
No, that was Don't Look Now. There was one that I think I watched it, where at the start Plankton is watching like a ghost horror movie. Just the weird shift of this show towards like horrific concepts.
Well, it can't be funny anymore, so it settles for just having like a terrifying, like it really is just X-Files under the sea at this point.
Well, what kind of fascinates me is like. So, one of my favorite videos on the internet is this, like, 3-hour-long video that's this one creator, I have to look him up afterwards and we can link it in the comments, going through the Gen Z childhood trauma iceberg, and it's, like, all of the different, like videos and stuff people saw on the internet, or, like, episodes of TV that, like, kids of, like, kind of my age and below will look at and be like, oh yeah, no, I remember that freaking me out. And I'm always fascinated just looking at media right now and thinking, like, what will that be in the future? You know, what media is, like, coming out right now that will be looked back on in a kind of, like, creepypasta-esque fashion? Because if you think about it, we're in this sort of golden age of lost media. Because while we have them here in Australia, thankfully, in a lot of countries like the US, because of like shitheels like that Zaslav guy, lots of shows that never got like physical media releases, like OKKO and Infinity Train, are being just like wiped off of streaming services for tax reasons. And that's going to result in a lot of people who maybe saw a few episodes of some shows as a kid looking back and thinking, was that real?
Yeah, just having no idea what they were even watching or if it was even real in the first place.
Yeah, because if you don't remember the title, you'll just end up like searching weird out of context stuff. I'll actually, I'll tell my experience with this, with the Nickelodeon thing, a bit later into the episode, because I love the kind of weird, like SpongeBob Boys is about many things, one of them being SpongeBob, but I think in a lot of ways, it's about like childhood and about acknowledging how things change as you grow up.
I think it's really a show about loss of innocence, honestly.
I think it is. I think that is the kind of thing that runs through, because SpongeBob is this weird thing that we all experienced as kids, but never really went away, and it exists in these two parallel lives, because we have all of these weird, like, kind of mostly terrible episodes that are coming out right now, and things like the movies and Camp Coral, but at the same time, we're seeing an almost constant proliferation of new memes for the last several years, the majority of which come from the classic episodes. So it's this, like, Dr. Manhattan existing in past and future at once type thing.
Exactly. And now, in such a weird way, there is more bad SpongeBob than there ever was good SpongeBob, but the good stuff just seems to get better. We just remember it in different ways and reconfigure it in new ways.
Yeah, and I think we learn to appreciate all of the things that we missed as kids. And I think the whole, like, oh, this went right over my head as a kid is generally kind of exclusively reserved for, like, sex jokes or something, right? I think there's a lot of things that, especially if, like us, you've, like, done comedy writing for things like Less is Morgue and stuff like that, you learn to just appreciate, like, oh damn, that was like a great like joke construction.
Yeah,
it's little things like that really stick with you. Speaking of stuff that sticks, like this shit is melting my brain, man.
What are we going? Where are we going with this? Where are we going with this?
Okay, so this episode is called Swamp Mates.
Oh god! Why do you always get stuff like greasy buffoons?
No,
and,
I get the awful,
swamp
just
mates?
gross ones.
Yeah.
I will ask you first things first, and I think let's make this a new let's make this a new component of the show. When I say the title, in one sentence, tell me what you think this episode will be.
So swamp mates, I'm imagining that maybe this is an episode where Plankton goes back to visit his family, and you get the hillbilly Planktons again. Either that or SpongeBob, Squidward, and Patrick end up lost in a swamp or something.
See, the first one would be like funny and clever. The second one would make sense. This episode chooses option 3.
Oh. What is option 3? What is option 3? Dear God, what is option 3?
Alright, so we open on SpongeBob in like a smoking jacket in his library. And I'm not making this up.
Bold choice starting off in the SpongeBob house library. The least used, most esoteric room that for some reason has like stuck in everyone's brain like a liminal space video.
No, it's so true. It's so fucking true. But, yeah, so we're in SpongeBob's library. He's got a smoking jacket on, and he's about to tell Gary a bedtime story. And, he spins around, and then afterwards he puts on, like, a kind of, like, British storyteller voice. And the way the subtitles describes this is embellished accent. In parentheses.
Oh, yes, I see. Embellished accent.
Like, if you said to someone, hey, can you do an embellished accent for me? They'd be like, what the fuck are you talking about?
Well, you know what I'd do? I'd probably just put on the weird non-specific accent that I did for the first couple Dire Gentlemen videos way back in 2015.
Oh, deep cut. He asked Gary what bedtime story he'd want, and both of my episodes are incredibly, like, fast and hyperactive in a bizarre way. It feels like just the number of beats per second is just disorienting. So he pulls out a couple of books, one of which, like, sprays flames on his face. Not cartoon flames, like After Effects flames.
Why? Why does it do that?
And because it's like a book about a dragon, and the second one he opens it, and like the head of like a live-action lion comes out, and he has to like close it. And then he pulls out the last one, and it's like, yes, no, this will be the tale of this will be the tale of two friends in a swamp, and we open on a superhero with a pugnacious posterior, Bubble Bass.
Bubble Bass is in the swamp in this magical Jumanji book that SpongeBob keeps in his library. Am I getting that right?
Yeah, we never return to the frame narrative, by the way. That's just done. That's just how they justify this episode.
now we're in a Bubble Bass centric episode that's a story that SpongeBob tells Gary?
Yeah. And that will get stupider as it goes along. This is legitimately one of the worst episodes. Like, if we were doing the, like, one of us, like, makes one of the episodes, you would 100% call bullshit on everything I tell you.
Yeah, because, like,
this.
not only is it a underused setting in SpongeBob, not only are there magical books for no explained reason, who tells a bedtime story to their cat?
About Bubble Bass?
About Bubble Bass, who's a superhero in this, I guess.
Let me tell you about this story about this guy who once tried to stiff me at work.
Is this Alan Moore's Swamp Thing, but done by SpongeBob?
No, it isn't. Okay, so it opens on Man Ray robbing a bank and running away. And then this, like, Bubble Bass, like, flying vehicle comes down, and Bubble Bass is in it. And he, like, puts some, his, like, heads-up display panel in his ship locks on to the fleeing Man Ray. And it's, like, target acquired. And he presses a button that says eject, which drops him from the thing. And as he's falling, he turns around, showing his massive ass to the camera in close-up, two defined cheeks with like a bwomp sound effect.
Oh, no.
And he just lands arse first on fucking Man Ray. And it's not like Man Ray is there, sprawled out on the ground beneath Bubble Bass's ass. Man Ray is gone.
He eliminated him with his ass. He assimilated him.
Yeah, it suggests the Bubble Bass butt-boyed him.
I'm in shock. Why is this? What?
This is such a cursed moment, and I turned and remarked on this to Meg, because the artist chose to draw, like, the cellulite on Bubble Bass's arse. Like, lines are drawn on it when it's, like, squished onto the ground, presumably covering or having devoured Man Ray.
This was drawn by people who really, really wanted to depict a fat ass as realistically as possible.
Yeah. And then it cuts into, like, a kind of, like, Mermaid Man underground base. Obviously, Mermaid Man doesn't say anything because Ernest Borgnine is dead at this point. Bubble Bass is kind of the leader of this, like, superhero group. And he's being interviewed by another superhero called Anchorman, who is both a news anchorman and a man holding an anchor. And he's like, I'm keeping the city safe from evil because no one could contend with my mighty hiney. And then he turns around, and his arse is on the table, and his arse has a dumbbell on each cheek, and he's, like, flexing each cheek to, like, raise the dumbbell.
Okay, this is weird enough, but I just keep thinking that, like, SpongeBob is giving all of these details to Gary.
Exactly.
Like right now, SpongeBob is doing an episode of Spongebob Boys, and he's what you're doing right now, and I'm Gary.
Yeah, SpongeBob is this story. Like, it's awful. But then
He has a
book.
He has the novelization of this in his house.
But wait. So then, midway through, they're like, oh, we're inviting a new superhero, Whale Woman. And then it pans... sorry, detail I forgot. They patch in the Chief, who is still played by, like, a live-action man in an office.
From the other Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy episode with the Every Villain is Lemons?
Yes, exactly. I think
Why?
it may be a different actor, but he's there, because callback. And
I mean, it's been years, so, like, I get recasting him, but also why?
He talks about there being a new villain, and you're immediately... This is rough, I'm not gonna lie.
Oh, no.
The villain is called Hoodoo Guru, the Voodoo Villain.
You know, something about that, it just doesn't hit the ear right. Something about that's a little, I don't know how I feel about that one.
I think it's Tom Kenny, and yes, he is doing a voice.
Woo, I'd really
He's
rather
doing the
not have
exact
been the one.
He's doing the exact voice that you think in your worst nightmares, a character called Hoodoo Guru, the Voodoo Villain, who, by the way, like, it doesn't even make sense. He has a fucking, like, tiki head? No, that's not even voodoo, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not an expert, but, like, God.
Well, yeah, like, voodoo is not a Hawaiian thing, it's a Haitian thing, and if he's doing a certain is he doing a, like, Indian accent because he's a guru?
No, it's like just a kind of like, just what I'd kind of describe it as like a kind of almost like Pan-African, maybe like towards like Caribbean accent.
So this episode continues to shock and surprise with its decisions.
Yeah, but it gets weirder. So Whale Woman isn't here. So at this point, we cut to the reality of what is happening. Bubble Bass is imagining all of this while playing with his Mermaid Man action figures in his mother's basement.
Okay, so SpongeBob is telling the story about how Bubble Bass pretended to be a superhero and was racist in his own fiction story.
Yeah, because the weird thing is, Bubble Bass, I think just because of his voice, he doesn't act like Bubble Bass in his original incarnation. He acts, and to be honest, talks exactly like comic book guy from The Simpsons.
Did they just forget who Bubble Bass was and they just decided, like, he's
Yeah.
comic book guy now?
Yeah, he's not like just an unreasonable like customer slash like kleptomaniac now. He's just a dweeb because he's fat and has the comic book guy voice and wears glasses. I
think they
always
just
saw Bubble
watched-
Bass as more of like a like in his 30s like slob than like a nerd.
Yeah, no, like, what he is, more than anything, is he's a male Karen. Like, like, I need to speak to your manager.
Yeah, exactly. His mother is like, oh, clean up down there, and he says, and she's like, oh, when you come up, and he's like, oh, you know that like natural light gives me gas, and then belches, and that's the first of several jokes like this in the episode.
Mom, I'm busy telling stories about how I kill people with my ass.
Yeah, no, exactly. Like I said to Meg, why in his own fantasy is he like an arse-based superhero?
He just loves like the idea that society will one day let him sit on people
Bubble Bass breaks the internet.
against their will, crucially. And so he creates this like narrative in which like, oh, well, if I only do it to criminals, then it's completely fine that I sit on people against their will.
He's like an arse-based Dexter.
Yeah. Today I'm an ass monster.
Yeah. Like, I have the urge to crush people with my ass, but don't worry, I have a code. I only do it to criminal.
But if he was fully Dexter, he'd only crush people with his ass that also crush people with their asses.
He looks into a bakery and is like, caked up, just like me.
Why is this episode called Swamp Friends? Is it because of swamp ass?
Wait, because yeah, you're right. It's taken entirely too long to get to the premise of this
We've
episode.
had two different framing devices that have nothing to do with swamps or friends. We have the like library bedtime story and then superhero narrative, and now we're in the third reality that's nesting inside of the other realities.
This is gonna be a long fucking episode.
I'm so sorry, man. And I can only assume we're at like minute 3, right? Like that's how quickly all
and
this
here's
has been
the thing,
going.
Here's the thing. This episode is 15 minutes long. The other one is an unusually short episode.
Oh, I love doing Spongebob Boys.
And that's the insane fucking... If you've made it this far in, work Bubble Bass Bubble Ass into your comment.
it's what it deserves.
His mom is like, oh, your playmate is here for your play date. Opens the door, and it's Patrick.
Patrick hangs out with Bubble Bass.
Yeah, so already we're getting into, yay, I'm sure the modern iterations of these two characters carrying an episode together will be awesome.
The thing is, it was either going to be Patrick or Mr. Krabs because they had to get another fat ass in there.
Yeah, God. So Patrick comes down and he immediately starts chewing on one of his action figures. Bubble Bass takes it out of Patrick's mouth and Patrick goes, sorry, I'm teething, and then opens his mouth to reveal one tooth as his gums pulse.
Fine, sure, throw that one in too. Why not?
And as they're like hanging out, Patrick is like, oh, what game should we play? And then Patrick goes, I know, let's play Swamp. So
I don't like this.
Patrick reaches into his shorts and he pulls out a black garbage bag full of rancid green water.
No.
I'm not kidding! This happened!
Why? Why is this happening? Why is SpongeBob still telling this story to Gary?
And he pours it out onto the ground and it fills up the whole room. And then Patrick goes and sits on Bubble Bass's toilet and flushes the toilet, causing the whole room to become a whirlpool that is sucking everything in, including Bubble Bass's Wonder action figure, along with Bubble Bass and Patrick. And as they're pulled under, when they surface again, they're in a swamp, like an actual swamp.
Okay, so this is another example of Patrick just warping reality, I guess.
Patrick just being a sadistic god.
Yeah, exactly. Like...
Bubble Bass turns to Patrick. How are you doing all of this? Patrick, I can do anything I want.
Sponge-a-mering.
Yeah. Anyway, so at this point, he's like, oh, this is a swamp. This is horrible. And Patrick is like, no, it's great. I'm going to breathe in the swamp air. And he inhales the air, including a bunch of jellyfish, which he then sneezes into Bubble Bass's mouth, shocking him. And Bubble Bass is like, I need water, and grabs a cup out of Patrick's hand that Patrick is drinking from and drinks it. There's like, what is this? And it turns out it was like swamp muck.
Oh my god.
Patrick grabs another cup and drinks, lands on his tongue, and legitimately, as the swamp muck hits Patrick's tongue, Fart with Reverb plays.
No!
Well, I rewinded just to make sure, but it does.
Jeez, oh my god. So we've just got, like, the worst YouTube editors editing this SpongeBob episode sound design.
Just a robot's editor is working on this.
Well, he had to get work somehow. I hope he got fired.
Yeah, god damn it. But, so then, while all this is happening, Bubble Bass sees a mysterious cloaked figure walking away with his Wonder Whale action figure, like, chuckling to himself. So they're like, okay.
Figure. So this swamp has other residents unbeknownst to these two swamp friends.
You will never guess where this is going. So
I haven't so far.
They paddle around a bit looking for something, and then they find this like shack. And there's one good joke in it, in this whole thing, where Bubble Bass goes like, maybe there'll be someone that we can talk to in this dilapidated domicile or something like that. And Patrick goes, doubtful, but there's probably someone in that shack.
Shut up, show.
Like, it's contrived, but it's the best joke of the episode.
Yeah, it is one of those things where it's like you could think of that, but you couldn't create a scenario, like one scenario in this episode that makes any sort of sense.
Wait, so they go to the shack, and it turns out the shack has 3 hillbilly crocodiles. Each one a different color. And they are making illegal hot sauce, clearly meant to be moonshine, with chili peppers in there.
God, I just love how respectful SpongeBob is to everyone's culture.
Right?
It's so good. It really just, whenever it like puts a lens on a community, it always just frames them in the most flattering light, and I really appreciate that about this show.
Like, of course, like people who live in a swamp are like, in essence, moonshine brewing hicks, because that's SpongeBob. So they go in, and the crocs are like, I bet you're here to steal our illegal hot sauce. And Bubble Bass is like, I have no interest whatsoever in your illegal hot sauce. And they're like, but what about him? And they're like, and it's so hot, it'll make your head come off. And they turn around, and Patrick is just chugging a jug of it, like in Fortnite, and then he belches fire, because of course this episode has like 5 different burp jokes in it, because they're not even fucking trying, and then his head comes off his body and yells like a whistle. his head lands in Bubble Bass's hands, but as the crocodiles are getting ready to give chase, Bubble Bass uses Patrick's head as, like, a gun, using, like, the fire belches to, like, keep them back.
But all the Crocs did was share the thing that Patrick willingly consumed. They are not the aggressors here.
And then they runs away with the head, with Patrick's headless body running along with them until Bubble Bass, during the chase, throws the, like, head back onto Patrick's body, and they manage to get away by Patrick doing more, like, flame belches, which act as, like, the motor for their log as it speeds away, because, of fucking course, these, like, Louisiana stereotype crocodiles, which, for a start, it specifies that they're crocodiles. It would have made so much more sense for them to be gators.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, it, like, I don't get what the story is here, because there's been, like, several different change. Like, is this all building to something? Is there any reason behind the constant, like, reality shifts into different aesthetics and different, like, what is this? What is this episode?
Wait for it, because I think the ending is going to piss you off.
All of it pisses me off so
Anyway,
far.
they managed to escape. However, at this point, they see the cloaked figure with Wonder Whale again, and Bubble Bass and Patrick start chasing him, and Bubble Bass says, "Give me back my Wonder Whale. You'll swing for this."
Like he's going to hang him?
Yeah.
Bubble Bass, one thing we've learned about Bubble Bass in this episode is that Bubble Bass has a very, like, punitive sense of justice.
Yeah, no, he is fucking Arse Dexter.
He's the ass punisher.
Yeah. The Bunisher.
And by swing, he means you're gonna swing between these cheeks.
Yeah, like, he hangs you from, like, the rope coming off of his anal beads. Awful. Awful. Anyway, the reason he says that is as they're going over, the hooded figure deploys, like, a net trap which captures the two, and he's like, "No, you'll swing for this, actually."
Oh my god.
And for this joke to work, it requires kids to be aware of not only, like, the capital punishment of hanging, but, like, euphemisms for it.
Yeah, that's very, very odd joke.
Because when a kid hears swing, they think playground.
Yeah, exactly. Like, oh, swinging for this is fun. I'm just imagining a kid watching Modern SpongeBob and be like, "Dad, what does you'll swing for this mean?"
That's so messed up. But
Well, back in the old days when they thought someone was a witch, they'd hang them by a rope
and it was rad.
in the center of town, and they should still do it, I tell you.
Don't know who this dad is.
I don't know. Really hates witches, I
At
guess.
this point, the cloaked figure pulls off their cloak, and it's Hoodoo Guru, the voodoo villain.
But he's real?
And that's what
He's
Bubble Bass says. Like, "You're real? What?" And at this point, he pulls a lever on the stone behind him. He says, "With Wonder Whale, I can complete my collection." And, like, a stone, like, wall comes down, revealing, like, his action figure collection. And he just puts Wonder Whale up on there. At
'Cause
which
after
point,
all,
at
it's
this
Wonder
point,
Whale.
fucking Bubble Bass is like, "Oh, what can we do?" And Patrick is like, "Here, have this bowl of spaghetti to feel better." And Bubble Bass is like, "Oh, glorious caloric intake." And he eats it. And then he's like, "Where did you get this from?" And Patrick goes, "It's all around us." And then Patrick eats the net.
And the net was spaghetti?
Either that or both of these guys just love the taste of rope.
Love the taste of rope. Maybe it's just because a hanging reference was made, but, like, love the taste of rope sounds like like a scary sheriff being like, "You're gonna love the taste of rope when we get you back to town."
Have you ever seen The Hateful Eight before?
Yes, I have.
Like, I'm just imagining this ends with Patrick and Bubble Bass just manually hanging Hoodoo Guru.
Hoodoo Guru, the voodoo villain? Yeah.
So fucked up.
You made a deal with that voodoo son of a bitch?
That would be super loaded given the coding here.
Yeah, no, incredibly loaded.
It's messed up. So anyway, they grab Wonderwell and about to escape, but then, just because it wasn't racially insensitive enough, Hoodoo Guru, the voodoo villain, pulls out a voodoo doll of Patrick and uses it to make Patrick start attacking Bubble Bass.
All right, okay, so I guess we're gonna go with the voodoo doll. I guess we're gonna go that route. I mean, why not go the whole 9 yards, right?
Yeah, but then he squeezes Bubble Bass so hard that Bubble Bass flies out of Patrick's grip and lands arse first on Hoodoo Guru, defeating him.
Of course.
Bubble Bass grabs Wonderwhale, and the two of them run off as Hoodoo Guru and the 3 Moonshine Gators start chasing them.
They were in cahoots?
Yeah, well, no, it's just like a sort of like wacky races or like rat race type thing where circumstances just results in them all chasing together. As they're escaping, they all like fall out and fall into the water. At which point, Bubble Bass wakes back up in the, like, rancid water flooded bedroom with Patrick. And Patrick is like, oh, you were dead for, like, 10 minutes there. And it's revealed that all of the swamp stuff was another Bubble Bass hallucination. And then Patrick is like, wow, this was the best play date ever. And Bubble Bass just slides off the chair into the rancid water, and the episode ends.
What? So like SpongeBob telling this story to Gary was like not even. Why was that even in there?
That's the thing. Like I said this to Meg after finishing it. Like SpongeBob told Gary the story of Bubble Bass hallucinating an adventure after Patrick nearly drowned him in garbage water.
Yeah, and it tied in with his prior superhero fantasies, all of which SpongeBob also narrates. That was Swamp Friends, I guess.
No, Swamp Mates.
Swamp Mates!
Which is even more cursed. I did not make a single detail of that up. That is, like, insane. Oh wait, no, I forgot. There is a final moment. It cuts back to the, like, empty murmur lair with just the chief.
In Bubble Bass's fantasy?
Yeah, but no one's in there. It's just the chief on the screen and a live action version of the Patrick Voodoo doll is on the console in front of the screen, and the chief reaches out of the screen and grabs the, like, actual, like, plastic Patrick Voodoo doll, brings it back into his world, and is like, finally, my collection is complete. And his desk is covered in SpongeBob toys. And he presses a button on one of the SpongeBob toys, and it releases a tinny laugh. Then the episode ends.
This is, okay, top to bottom, this is horrifying. The fact that this exists is, like, what? How? How did any of this come to resemble its final form? I don't see how any of these decisions ever were made in this sequence.
The most bizarre thing about it is that, like...
And it's 15 minutes long!
And with just the different stuff that happens, this episode would not have been easy to make.
Was this some kind of, like, special? And also, why was a Bubble Bass and Patrick-centric episode a special?
Yeah, why did... No one wanted this.
Literally no one wanted this. Like, Bubble Bass is not known to be a character that everyone loves to sympathize with. He's a nemesis.
Yeah, Bubble Bass is literally, like Flats, meant to be like a frustrating character you hate because he's being unfair to SpongeBob. And the fact that, like, this isn't just SpongeBob telling this story off the dome. It's in a written book in his library.
Yeah. Well, so, like, and I can't emphasize enough, you know, Bubble Bass is like a incarnate. He is He is meant to evoke the second strongest emotion. He's a dark mirror to ourselves of what we could become if we, like, let ourselves be evil.
Yeah, if we were rude, slovenly bastards who disrespect service workers.
He's not something to inspire to be, is what I'm saying.
So what's your next episode, guys? Can you top Swamp Mates?
I can tell you that no, I can't. Like, what I can do is give you a more normal episode after that one, which I think is what all of us need.
Yeah, I think I'm still, like, I'll put it this way. So, after watching Swamp Mates and my other episode, I gathered a bunch of things for another video we're recording today while watching Better Call Saul just to get the taste out of my mouth. And still, I remember all of this with this level of clarity.
It's like you could, like, I would absolutely forgive you right now if you told me that this was like a dream you had about a SpongeBob episode.
If this was my dream, I'd be concerned why so much, like, Bubble Bass fat ass was in it.
Well, you know, it's dreams aren't always what they appear to be.
I wake up, look under the covers, not again.
Oh no! I made a swamp. I played swamp.
Yeah. I played the naughty boy game.
Oh, now the grabber's gonna grab my wiener.
The show is horrible. Why did any of you want it back? All right.
We're the real swamp mates, Henry.
This is the Swamp Gentleman channel now.
All right, are you ready for Teacher's Pests?
Oh no, is this a Mrs. Puff torture porn episode?
Not exactly, though she does feature in it, but it is more like a two characters torture each other episode.
Okay, alright. Teacher's Pet. Alright, so can I make a prediction then?
Go ahead.
It's a flashback episode that somehow fucks with continuity.
No, it isn't. But it is an episode that works. It is an episode that relies on the audience not remembering a previous SpongeBob episode.
Oh boy, okay, let's go. The wonderful negative continuity of Spongebob Squid Pants.
So, this episode begins with Mr. Krabs getting into a terrible traffic violation. Several cars are piled up. He's being chewed out by the police. He has caused some real problems, and he's being sent to traffic school.
We had this episode, but with Squidward, didn't we?
Maybe?
Like, no,
Maybe.
legitimately, I think this... Because it's one of those ones that, like, Mr. Enter got real weird about, where SpongeBob was, like, super stalkery in it. And I think it basically had the exact same premise of Squidward got a traffic violation and needed to go to driving school.
Okay, so it's in a genre of episodes where established characters go into SpongeBob's weird boating school subplot that never gets resolved.
Yeah.
And so Mr. Krabs arrives there in the classroom. He's like the first one there, and SpongeBob's not there, Mrs. Puff isn't there, and he goes to sit down on a desk, and all of a sudden he cries out in pain, and Plankton is holding a thumbtack. And Plankton says, "Easy with that hiney, Eugene. This is my desk."
Enough arses. Enough.
Exactly. It's just like, it's a Mr. Krabs episode. Time to talk about his hiney.
Welcome to the new show, Sponge Ass Arse Arse.
Ass butt ass pants.
Is the previous episode that this forgets the fact that, like, Mrs. Puff and Mr. Krabs have, like, dated multiple times across multiple episodes?
Sort of, because this ties into the whole, like, you know, sunken place lucidity theory we were talking about earlier in regards to SpongeBob characters.
Yeah.
Because Mr. Krabs and Plankton fight over who's getting which desk, and it takes up like 3 minutes of the episode as they run around and destroy all the desks in the classroom. It feels that long. Before Mrs. Puff enters the room. And so Mrs. Puff kind of disciplines the two of them, tells them to sit down in the two remaining desks, and Mr. Krabs says something like, "Oh yes, cutie," and that's the only reference we get to Mr. Krabs being attracted to Mrs. Puff.
That's the thing. They've been on dates in obviously the OG one with the, we're not talking about this or this, we're talking about this. But also, like, in that weird, like, imitation crabs episode with, like, flesh crabs, they're still dating.
Yeah, like at this point they have a level of familiarity that like they've been dating long term. But this episode can't remember that because Mr. Krabs' designated trait in this is he hates plankton and wants to stop plankton. He doesn't have the like character capacity to also be the Mr. Krabs that loves Mrs. Puff.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Mr. Krabs and Plankton are an interesting thing because, like, there were nuances in the old ones. The fact that they did, like, weekly poker nights.
Yeah, but now they just hate each other. And this episode is about them, like, this is about them wanting to be the best driver in driving school.
A super compelling plot that both of them have good reasons to really actually care about.
Oh, well, just wait. We'll get to that. But first, Mrs. Puff doubles down on her discipline stance. She whips out a pair of brass knuckles, and she says, I mean it! If you jokers step out of line, you're gonna get one of these!
Cut to Mr. Krabs and Plankton with, like, zipped up, like, gimp masks on.
Well, no, here's the thing. Plankton just goes, brass knuckles? Respect. And that's the only nod we get to why Mrs. Puff had brass knuckles.
Strange.
Very strange, because it's like, oh yes, Plankton knows about violent things because he's a criminal.
I mean, Mrs. Puff is an ex-con.
That's true. She probably picked up some brass knuckle techniques.
It would have been really funny if she dropped, like, I was in prison once.
That would be the best. That would have been the best joke.
That would be a great continuity nod.
Yeah, exactly. No, that would have been perfect. Anyway, here's SpongeBob to ruin it.
Oh yeah, because this episode I felt didn't have enough moving parts.
The way that SpongeBob enters this episode is that Mrs. Puff starts showing a, like, driving instructional film, which, again, eats up another couple minutes because it's like saying, like, the things you're not supposed to do while you're actually driving. And the joke here is that the person doing everything wrong in the film is SpongeBob.
Wait, didn't they once have, like, a whole episode that was just, like, an old, like, boating instruction tape that was this exact thing?
If they did, then, yeah, this episode is once again just kind of a chimera of, old parts that have been restitched together.
We just like to reuse old footage here.
Exactly. So SpongeBob on the screen, he drives towards the camera and he, like, crashes and he bursts in through the projector screen into the classroom. And Mrs. Puff is like, you should have used the door. And so SpongeBob is here, and he's suddenly really excited that he's, like, in class with Mr. Krabs, because he's like, oh, now you're my boss and my classmate, and I'm going to show you the ropes, like, how to earn good noodle stars.
What a brilliant callback to another episode that was just some other character has to do boating school for some reason.
Exactly. So now Mr. Krabs and Plankton become obsessed with the noodle stars because they're so shiny and cool. Mr. Krabs really wants to do them, and because Krabs wants to do them, Plankton wants to do them. So they both start, like, kissing up to Mrs. Puff and giving her, like, fruit. Like an apple on the desk, a grapefruit. It accelerates into Plankton throws a watermelon at her face, and then they start just throwing fruit into her mouth.
What more wonderful kind of fetish-adjacent things?
Yeah, the two of them are just suddenly surrounded by all this fruit, and they're throwing it into Mrs. Puff's mouth, until she's like, enough, and her mouth is just full of all this fruit. But Plankton's like, no, this isn't over, and he goes and empties out a bunch of seeds into her throat.
Oh, I don't like this. Is this that urban legend that everyone was afraid of as kids, that, like, an apple tree would, like, grow out of their fucking face if they ate apple seed?
Fortunately, it's not as gross as it could be, as in Mrs. Puff's bodily integrity isn't threatened, but out of her open mouth, a huge tree does grow, which she then takes out of her mouth and uses to bludgeon Mr. Krabs and Plankton because of how stupid they've been being.
Mrs. Puff is one of those characters you just start to really feel sorry for. Because it's like, God, her life is hell. Her husband was killed and turned into a lamp.
She's dating a crab who half the time doesn't even remember that they're dating.
Yeah, she's dating an awful cheapskate with Alzheimer's and a like shitty, unreasonable kid.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what it all comes down to.
All right, so what happens next in this bizarre charade?
So for some reason, SpongeBob is like, I wish I got disciplined too. And he grabs a bit of the tree and bonks himself with it a bunch of times. And Mrs. Puff is like, stop that.
Cut to image of SpongeBob in the suds on like Patrick's torture rack.
Yeah, no, exactly. It's one of many things that, like, again, just feels like padding. This is another one of those modern SpongeBob episodes where it's like, okay, we've written the episode description. Now let's just fill it with as many like gags that we've already used and things that can take up time as possible.
It's another thing of just like, guys, we desperately have to hit page count. So just anything you can throw in.
There are two kinds of modern SpongeBob episodes. There's ones like these, and the other one I did where, like, a time-consuming thing takes up most of the episode. Like, in the other one, it was, like, the patty monsters feeding themselves to everybody, and that takes, like, way too long. And then there's the kind, like the one you just did, Swamp Mates, where it's just, like, just keep boom, 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 boom. Just keep switching to new sensory inputs. Just keep doing new things.
New sensory attacks.
So anyway, this whole like Mr. Krabs and Plankton are fighting each other continues into the actual boating lessons. Mrs. Puff is teaching them about rear view mirrors. Every time she looks into the mirror, they're bludgeoning each other with medieval weaponry like maces and spiked bats. And every time she turns back around, they're just being normal.
These are my least favorite kinds of jokes, and this episode has a lot of them, where the joke is just, like, escalating stuff. Like, what if every time the fruits got bigger and more numerous? What if the things we were hitting each other with got, like, bigger and more dangerous?
Exactly. And then that gag ends with, like, them being like, oh, nothing, and then a bunch of weapons fall out of their pants all at once.
Yeah, it's so fucking lame.
Well, are you ready for the third such joke that follows this same pattern?
Oh, wonderful. Goody goody. I'm being so treated today.
So, SpongeBob, Mr. Krabs, and Plankton all get into these boats for, like, a training lap. And for some reason, the boats are all color-coded to their things. Like, SpongeBob's driving a boat with a yellow bottom. Krabs has one with a red bottom. Plankton has one with a green bottom. For some reason. And this becomes increasingly hard to believe when Mrs. Puff is like, all right, go. And they all decide to drag race, and they all crash all at once.
Incredible.
And then we get a bubble transition, and they all start up again, and they all crash all at once a second time, adding nothing to the joke.
Have you noticed that, like, there's no sense of, like, 3-act structure to a lot of this shit? There's no sense of inciting incident. And so, until finally...
Yeah, it's more just like, and then...
Yeah, it is just, like, just endless shtick.
Yeah, exactly. We're 2 sets of boats deep, and the third time they're gonna go do this drag race, Mrs. Puff is like, these are the last boats I have. Don't destroy them. Please don't destroy them. These are the last ones I have. I'll lose my teaching license if you do it one more time.
So they're just gonna fully ruin this woman's life for comedy now.
As usual, when Mrs. Puff appears in an episode. You're right, you know? On some level, this is like a stealth Mrs. Puff torture porn, but her torment, her turmoil, it's in the background this time. It's a subplot.
And there is, like, an unusually high number of, like, vectors for torment for old Mrs. Puff this time.
So in the climax of this episode, Mr. Krabs and Plankton start racing around. They start racing around the yard, and they start going full Tokyo Drift and doing, like, all these tricks, including racing up the side of the, like, boating school tower. Like, that lighthouse-looking tower. They're, like, literally driving on the wall up it towards the top.
So this is full-on fucking Fast and Furious now.
Yes, and Plankton gives this amazing line, and no joke, this one kind of like floored me. I had to go back and listen to it. He says, "I'm a god in this boat, and I'm on my way to heaven."
That is actually like I love the things that are just the genre of like weirdly raw lines for the thing that produced them.
Yeah, like I kind of like respect the hell out of that line for no other reason that it just goes so hard in an episode that has no reason to.
No, it's kind of brilliant, honestly.
Yeah, so that leads to like Mr. Krabs and Plankton crashing into each other, blowing up the entire tower, and somehow both of them survive, and they're like in the rubble of the thing.
Somehow, Plankatine return.
Plankatine. Sheaved in Plankatine.
The ultimate villain.
God. I have to get the light side secret formula. Oh, fuck. Okay, but anyway, they've survived the rubble, and they're in there in the pit, and Mrs. Puff fails both of them, because obviously, and the fate of her teaching license is left kind of tantalizingly to the audience's mind. But Plankton says something like, "Hey, don't we at least get some points for surviving? That was crazy dangerous." At which point, SpongeBob drives his boat over towards them, and they all explode.
They're all killed.
It sure seems that way until... Henry, you remember when I said earlier that this episode felt like a chimera of old parts of SpongeBob episodes stitched back together?
Oh, I am terrified of all the things this could imply.
So, Krabs, Plankton, and SpongeBob all wake up in the hospital, alive, but stitched together.
Can they get through one episode without at least one image that's like, I fucking wish I could go back to a time when I didn't know about this?
Yeah, and then it just ends. That's the end of the episode, is that they're all stitched together now.
Who wanted this?
I don't know. And the thing is, this isn't even the last time this isn't even like the first time that SpongeBob characters have ended an episode as some kind of like fused abomination. Like there was the episode where Squidward got fused with everyone, and it ends with him in the hospital. Like
it all started when I was born. Like, yeah, you can't do a SpongeBob thing without some, like, soul-shattering body horror these days.
Exactly. You need it. That's what the people want, I guess. It's what keeps the ratings up.
I've got to say, this last episode that I'm going to give you now, which is mercifully short.
Right, because the odyssey that was Swamp Mates had to take up that much of the runtime.
Yeah, it was such an important episode.
Really a milestone in ass.
Yeah, just fucking... You need at least 15 minutes to contain Bubble Bass's bodacious butt cheeks. The last episode is called One Trick Sponge. Can you guess what it's about?
Is this SpongeBob realizing that he doesn't have any talents other than one thing he's good at?
No, it's another thing where it's kind of a lamer version of an already pretty lame episode from the past.
Because I was gonna say, if it was that, it would be a prime example of the, like, one character trait at a time. Because SpongeBob's a good fry cook, he jellyfishes, he does karate, like, he likes the jokes, he takes care of his cat. He's got a lot of talents, but, I was fully prepared for an episode where he forgets all of them but one.
No, this episode is actually, he learns a magic trick, and he wants to show it to everyone.
Boy.
And this episode is written by Mr. Lawrence, who...
has given us good ones in the past.
But that's the thing. Whether a Mr. Lawrence episode is good or bad, there is always one commonality. And it's that Mr. Lawrence, it feels like, tries to get as many legacy characters into one of his episodes as possible.
Ah, so it's gonna be one of those.
Well, here's the thing. That worked pretty well with Mimic Madness, because that had quite a defined concept. Here, it feels incredibly just lazy, phoned in, and cynical.
SpongeBob and the Multiverse of Madness, I understand.
Yeah, basically. So, the thing is, another thing that I've noticed that, like, Mr. Lawrence loves, he loves, taking advantage of the fact that SpongeBob can just sort of, like, twist into weird shapes. So that kind of shit is always happening in his episodes.
Right, okay, yeah. I mean, in Mimic Madness, it was, like, literally the point, but, like, so it's just incidental in this one?
Yeah, here he's just like, for example, he like twists under Patrick's rock trying to find him to show him the magic trick and like stretches out. But Patrick isn't under his rock. So he goes to Squidward's house and like, because Squidward is like, oh, if he doesn't know that I'm in, he can't try and show me the trick. So SpongeBob like stretches his eye through the peephole of Squidward's door. And it's like stretching in and like wrapping around Squidward until it sees him. Until then the rest of SpongeBob kind of like twists in.
SpongeBob has many qualities, but like he doesn't have the physiology of Jake the dog. That's never been one of his standout traits.
Yeah, no, he basically is kind of Jake the dog in this. It's super strange. So Squidward runs away. Next he runs to Mr. Krabs, and one trait Krabs is in full force here. He's like, oh, Mr. Krabs, can I show you a magic trick? And Mr. Krabs says, oh, would this happen to be one of these magic tricks where you pull a money coin? He literally says money coin. Out from behind someone's ear? And SpongeBob is like, no, it's a card trick. And Mr. Krabs is like, then what's the point? And slams the door on him.
His family's doing their best with him since, since the condition worsened.
God, it's awful. But then he goes to Sandy. And this is another, oh great, we're kicked off of YouTube moment, where he goes into Sandy to give her the thing, and he's talking to her and she's not paying attention. He takes her helmet off and sees that her head is gone. There's literally a shot of her body, but like her neck is just a stump.
Okay, but it's the suit, right? It's the suit?
No, her body is in the suit and it's the stump.
Okay.
And her disembodied voice goes, oh, sorry, SpongeBob. My head is in another dimension, observing things. And then you cut to Sandy's floating head, looking at a tree, in the swamp from Swamp Mates, while Bubble Bass and Patrick are chased in the background.
What? Wait, so we're introducing another layer of reality to the Swamp Mates, and universe? What?
Yeah.
Why? For whom? What is this for?
So then, the last person SpongeBob goes to is Fred, that one green fish.
Oh, the My Leg Man.
Yeah, and you know he's the My Leg Man because his door knocker is a little leg.
Come on! Come on! Really?
Yeah. SpongeBob knocks on the door with it, and he comes out and he's like, hey, Fred, do you want to see a magic trick? And he's like, oh, that's so cool. Are you gonna, pull a rabbit out from my leg? Or, make my leg disappear?
He's really going all in. He's really, made a name for himself. It feels like Fred's kind of sold out on this whole my leg thing.
Yeah, and SpongeBob pulls out the cards. He's like, actually, no, it's a card trick. And Fred goes, no, sorry, I'm not going to be able to do that. I've got to go in and wash my thighs.
And then we cut to extreme zoom in on him washing his tender, thick thighs.
It feels like the implication that, Fred cummed himself.
He's got to wash his leg after he came.
Fred came in his pants.
Well, that's why he's always saying my leg, because he keeps coming on his leg.
But here's the thing. SpongeBob goes to leave. Fred goes to leave too, but closes the door, cutting off his own leg, then saying, my leg, inside the door.
Stop, dude!
And it's like, wow, you took the one funny joke this guy is known for and you ruined it.
Well, I know there's an episode that's completely about him and the my leg bit.
Yeah, it's just gotta keep driving that meme into the ground. Maybe it'll bring nostalgic people back. So then, SpongeBob, the end of the episode, he goes to this, place that's full of, coral and giant mushrooms. And he decides to assemble just a bunch of fake people out of, rocks and stuff.
To show them the magic trick?
Yeah. and he like puts on like a full costume and hat, and he does the magic trick, and it just enters this kind of just weird, unpleasant, like pink elephants-esque, like even down to the music montage of whatever this card trick is meant to be, where he like clones himself and gets chopped in half, and he's like running around, and there is like a huge collage of cards, and it's all in the hat. Then at the end, he jumps out and says, "Ta-da!" And he goes, "Oh, it would have been better if Patrick was here." And then Patrick goes, "I've been here the whole time." And he's standing up on one of the big mushrooms, and he jumps down. And SpongeBob is like, "What was your favorite bit?" Patrick goes, the bit where you said, "Ta-da!" That was great." And then SpongeBob and Patrick decide to do the trick again, and they both, like, jump into the hat, and just magic sparkles are coming out of it as they laugh, and the episode ends.
Okay, so this is what I'd like to call, both of your episodes, which are a match set, this is what I like to call gas leak SpongeBob. Because, like, that's the only explanation, right? That, like, during the day they came up with and storyboarded and wrote all these episodes, there was just a persistent gas leak. And once they fixed it, they're like, oh, well, we already made the episodes. We might as well air them.
Yeah, it's a gas leak that affected both the writing and the, like, acting. Patrick, again, is genuinely, it kind of oscillates between being a, like, super-powered sociopath and a guy who genuinely seems, like, brain damaged.
You know what's very strange, too? Like, ordinarily I wouldn't, like, point out something like this, but it has me curious. If Sandy was observing Patrick in another dimension, and Patrick's also in this episode at the end, is this, like, multiverse theory?
The multiverse of Patricks.
The multiverse of Patrick, yeah.
Dr. Mr. Professor Patrick and the multiverse of Patrick.
Spongebob Boys and the multiverse of Patrick.
It certainly feels interesting to be back, and if you'd like more of this, please, comment and say more SpongeBob Boys.
And I gotta say, too, like, as much as these are uniquely unpleasant, they do get those old, like, gears in the brain turning, because there are things that you can see in modern SpongeBob that you would never in your wildest dreams and nightmares ever imagine could be real.
Yeah, you're goddamn right. So, one thing has remained true throughout all of this. This is SpongeBob Boys, and you're not ready.